The silverware clinked against fine china as I sat at the head of the table, watching my daughter Tessa raise her wine glass. Her eyes sparkled with that familiar mischief I had adored since she was 3 years old. "To the man I love," she announced, her voice cutting through the gentle dinner conversation. "And to the woman who raised him." My chest tightened. The room tilted slightly as I gripped my napkin. The man beside her turned toward me, and my world collapsed. It was Noah. The same Noah I had tucked into bed during thunderstorms. The same Noah whose scraped knees I had bandaged. The same Noah who called me his second mother for 8 years. He raised his glass, his eyes meeting mine with something I couldn't quite name. Defiance? Guilt? Challenge? The betrayal hit me like a physical blow, stealing my breath and turning the expensive wine in my mouth to vinegar. Around us, friends and family continued eating, oblivious to the earthquake happening inside me. My name is Eleanor Price, I'm 66 years old, and that night, I realized I had raised both my daughter and my replacement. The memory came flooding back as I sat frozen at that dinner table. Noah had been 16 when Officer Martinez brought him to my door, a skinny kid with hollow eyes and bruises that weren't from any accident. His parents had died in a highway crash 3 weeks earlier, and the system was failing him. His aunt didn't want him. His uncle drank too much. Nobody wanted the broken boy with the angry stare. I was a widow myself, still raw from losing Thomas just 2 years before. My friends warned me against it. "You have enough on your plate with Tessa," they said. "Don't take on someone else's troubled teenager." But something in Noah's eyes reminded me of my own grief. So I took him in. I gave him Thomas's old room. I enrolled him in the good school district. I sat with him through nightmares and homework. I taught him to cook Sunday breakfast and balance a checkbook. For 8 years, he was part of our family. The engagement announcement spread through our small town like wildfire. I woke up the next morning to 17 text messages and 6 voicemails. My best friend Patricia called me before sunrise. "Eleanor, tell me it's not true," she begged. "Tell me Tessa isn't actually marrying Noah." But it was true. Tessa had posted pictures on social media, her left hand prominently displayed with a diamond ring that caught the light. The comments section was a mixture of congratulations and carefully worded confusion. "Wasn't he like your brother?" someone asked. Tessa replied with a laughing emoji. "Love doesn't follow rules." At church that Sunday, people stared. Some approached with pitying expressions. Others avoided eye contact entirely. Mrs. Henderson from the book club actually patted my hand and whispered, "You poor thing." I smiled through it all, my face a mask of composure. But inside I was screaming. My silence that week said more than any outburst ever could. I found Noah alone in my garden 3 days after the announcement. He was trimming the roses, something I had taught him years ago. "We need to talk," I said quietly. He didn't look up, just kept clipping dead blooms with mechanical precision. "I gave you everything," I continued, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. "A home, an education, a family. And you repay me with this." Finally, he turned to face me. His expression had hardened in ways I didn't recognize. "I'm not your son, Eleanor," he said, each word deliberate and cold. "You made that clear when you refused to see me as a man. I was always just your charity project, wasn't I?" The accusation stung worse than any slap. "That's not fair," I whispered. "Fair?" He laughed bitterly. "What's fair is that I found someone who sees me as I am. Someone who chose me, not out of pity, but out of love." He walked past me, leaving the pruning shears on the bench. I stood there until sunset, understanding finally settling over me like frost. I had been erased. 2 weeks later, Tessa and Noah moved into my house, temporarily, while they looked for their own place. Tessa had sold this as practical. "It's just until we save enough for the down payment, Mom," she explained over the phone. "You have all that space." What choice did I have? Say no and prove I was the bitter mother everyone whispered about? So I agreed. Within days, my home became foreign territory. I found my favorite reading chair moved to the basement. My late husband's study, which I had kept untouched for 15 years, was converted into Noah's home office. The photographs on the mantel disappeared, replaced by modern art pieces I didn't recognize. One morning, I walked into my own kitchen to find Noah wearing Thomas's old robe, the blue terry cloth one I had kept in my closet. He was making coffee like he owned the place. Our eyes met. He didn't apologize or explain. Just turned back to the coffee maker. That afternoon, I went to my bedroom and pulled out a suitcase. I left on a Tuesday morning while they were both at work. My note was brief. Taking some time away. The house is yours to maintain. Don't worry about me. I signed the papers at my lawyer's office that same afternoon. Harrison Gates had been Thomas's friend and had handled our affairs for 20 years. Are you absolutely certain about this? He asked, reviewing the trust documents. I nodded. The house would remain mine, held in an irrevocable trust. Tessa and Noah could live there, maintain it, even renovate it. But they could never own it. They could never sell it. They could never profit from it. If they leave, I told Harrison, the house becomes part of the community youth program. He studied my face carefully. This is quite calculated, Eleanor. I met his gaze steadily. They can have the walls and the roof, but it will never truly be theirs. I signed the last document with a hand that didn't shake. Some betrayals deserve consequences, not drama. The cottage I rented sat on the edge of Miller's Lake, 30 minutes outside town. It was small, just 2 bedrooms and a kitchen that barely fit a table. But it was mine. The first morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through curtains I had chosen, hitting walls painted a color I liked. No Noah making coffee in Thomas's robe. No Tessa rearranging my furniture. Just silence and space and the gentle lap of water against the dock. I spent those first weeks healing in small ways. I painted the bedroom a soft yellow. I planted herbs in clay pots on the windowsill. I volunteered at the Riverside Youth Center, the same type of program where I had worked before Tessa was born. The kids there were hungry for guidance, for someone to see them as more than problems to solve. In their faces, I remembered why I had taken Noah in all those years ago. Not because I needed to save someone, but because everyone deserves to be seen. Back at my old house, cracks were beginning to show. Patricia, who remained loyal to me despite Tessa's coldness, reported everything. They're renovating, she told me over coffee at the Lakeside Cafe. Knocking down walls, redoing the kitchen. The contractors are there every day. I stirred my coffee slowly. That must be expensive. Patricia nodded. Very. And Tessa quit her job at the school. Said she wanted to focus on making the house perfect. The words hung between us. Tessa had been a second-grade teacher, passionate about her students. She had given that up to play house with Noah. Over the following weeks, Patricia's reports grew more concerning. The renovation was costing 3 times the original estimate. Noah had become demanding with the contractors, insisting everything be luxury grade. Tessa was maxing out credit cards to buy furniture. They're fighting, Patricia added quietly. The neighbors hear them through the windows. Noah criticizes everything Tessa does. She snaps back, but then apologizes. I closed my eyes briefly. My daughter was learning a hard lesson. Sunday service at Grace Community Church had always been my anchor. That week, I sat in my usual pew, 3 rows from the front, and listened to the whispers rippling through the congregation. They thought they were being subtle, but in a town of 4,000 people, secrets were impossible to keep. Did you hear about Noah Whitmore's law firm? Mrs. Chun murmured to her husband loud enough for me to overhear. Investigation for fraud. My ears perked up, though I kept my eyes on the hymnal. His partner discovered forged documents, someone else added. Used Eleanor's name to secure donations for that charity case last year. I remained perfectly still, absorbing this information. Noah had built his small practice on his reputation as my foster son, the boy who overcame tragedy with Eleanor Price's help. He had leveraged my name, my community standing, to attract clients who trusted me. And apparently he had betrayed that trust too. After service, I didn't gossip. I simply shook hands, smiled gently, and listened. Information gathered quietly is always more powerful than information demanded loudly. The cottage needed a new roof before winter, so I called Dalton Construction, recommended by my neighbor. Mark Dalton arrived on a Thursday morning, a tall man in his 50s with kind eyes and carpenter's hands. Mrs. Price, he said, extending his hand. I remember you. I replaced your porch steps about 5 years ago, at the old house on Maple Street. I shook his hand, surprised by the memory. I don't recall. He smiled. You made my crew lemonade and asked my youngest son about his college plans. He's graduating this year, thanks partly to you encouraging him. We talked while he assessed the roof, not about my losses but about building things that last. He shared stories of renovations gone wrong and clients who thought they knew better than their contractors. I found myself laughing genuinely for the first time in weeks. You've got good bones here, he said finally, tapping the cottage frame. Just needs proper care. He wasn't just talking about the roof. Over the following weeks as his crew worked, Mark and I developed an easy friendship built on respect and understanding, not history or obligation. The town's monthly community brunch was held at the country club, an event I had never missed in 20 years. I almost stayed home this time, but Patricia insisted. You can't hide, Eleanor. That's letting them win. So I went, wearing my favorite blue dress and my mother's pearls. I was serving myself from the buffet, when I heard Tessa's voice carry across the room. Oh, Mom's doing fine, she was telling a group of women from her old teaching circle. She's living in this tiny cottage by the lake. It's actually quite cute for someone her age. A fresh start, you know? The laughter that followed was polite but unmistakable. My daughter was mocking me. I set down my plate and walked directly to their table. The conversation stopped. Tessa's smile faltered. I looked at each woman, then finally at my daughter. You'll understand humility soon enough, I said quietly, my voice carrying that particular tone mother's master. The one that says everything without shouting. Then I returned to my table, my back straight, my head high. The silence I left behind was more powerful than any argument. I had never been particularly political or public, but grief has a way of clarifying priorities. I joined the board of the Riverside Youth Center, then the town's education committee. I advised the community college on their outreach programs. Quietly, without fanfare, I began rebuilding a life that wasn't defined by who had hurt me, but by who I chose to help. One afternoon, a young woman approached me after a board meeting. Her name was Vanessa Moore, and she worked as a paralegal at the courthouse. Mrs. Price, she said nervously. I don't know if you remember me. You helped me get my scholarship to community college 5 years ago. I studied her face, recognition dawning. Vanessa, you wanted to study law. She nodded. Because of you I did. And now I need to tell you something about Noah Whitmore's practice. We sat in my car for an hour while she explained the forged documents, the misappropriated funds, the clients who had trusted Noah because of his association with me. I've been gathering evidence, she said. But I wanted you to know first. I squeezed her hand. Do what's right, Vanessa. Always. The fall came swiftly for Noah. Within 2 weeks of Vanessa's revelations, the State Bar Association suspended his license pending investigation. His partner dissolved their practice. Clients filed complaints. The local newspaper ran a front-page story with a headline that made me wince despite everything. Local attorney faces fraud charges. Tessa called me for the first time in 2 months. Mom, we need help, she said without preamble. Noah's accounts are frozen. The bank is threatening foreclosure on the renovation loan. Can I what? I asked calmly. The house is in a trust, Tessa. You know that. But you could loan us money. Just until this blows over. It's all a misunderstanding. I was silent for a long moment, watching the lake ripple in the autumn wind. Is it? I asked. Is it really a misunderstanding, or is it exactly what it appears to be? She made a sound between a sob and a gasp. You're really not going to help us? I didn't say that. Come to the cottage tomorrow. Alone. We'll have tea. She hung up without answering. But the next day she didn't come. Winter arrived early that year, bitter and unforgiving. Patricia reported that the heating system at my old house had failed. They're trying to fix it themselves, she said, shaking her head. Too proud to hire someone now that the money's gone. I imagined my beautiful home, the house where Thomas and I had built our life, where I had raised Tessa and taken in Noah, now cold and dark. The irony wasn't lost on me. A house that had once glowed with warmth and laughter had become as frozen as the relationship inside it. They're fighting constantly, Patricia continued. Noah blames Tessa for everything. Says if she hadn't pushed for the expensive renovations, they'd have savings to fall back on. Tessa throws it back that he's the one who lost his license, his income. I sipped my tea, feeling nothing but a distant sadness. They're tearing each other apart, I observed quietly. Patricia nodded. The neighbors say Noah's been sleeping in his car some nights, just sitting in the driveway, refusing to go inside. The boy I had rescued was now a man who couldn't even find refuge in the home I had given him. Some lessons I have learned can only be taught by consequence. The annual Riverside Charity Gala was the social event of the season, a black tie affair that raised funds for youth programs across the county. This year, I was being honored for my volunteer work and community contributions. I almost declined the recognition, but Mark convinced me otherwise. Let them see you thriving, he said simply. The ballroom of the Grand Hotel sparkled with lights and crystal. I wore a simple black gown, my mother's pearls, and a quiet confidence I hadn't felt in months. When my name was called, the applause was genuine and long. I gave a brief speech about second chances, and the responsibility we all share to lift up the next generation. From my position on stage, I saw Noah enter the ballroom. He looked diminished somehow, his tuxedo hanging slightly loose, his face drawn. He had come to save face, to show the town he could still attend these events. But every eye that turned toward him carried judgment, not respect. The cameras flashed as I returned to my seat, and in one of those flashes, I saw Tessa standing near the back. She was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. We had shared a name, shared blood, shared a home. But at that moment, we were complete strangers. The gala's keynote speaker was Vanessa Moore, the young paralegal who had exposed Noah's crimes. She approached the podium with confidence I remembered encouraging years ago. Integrity, she said, her voice clear and strong, is not something we're born with. It's learned by example. Someone once showed me that doing the right thing matters more than doing the easy thing. That person is here tonight. She gestured toward me. Mrs. Eleanor Price taught me that character is built in small, consistent choices. That lesson shaped my career and my life. The applause that followed made my eyes sting with unexpected tears. Across the room, I saw Noah's jaw tighten, his hands clenched around his water glass. The irony must have burned. I had shown Vanessa the same kindness I had shown him, given her the same opportunities. She had used them to build integrity. He had used them to build a facade that eventually crumbled. After the speeches, several people approached to congratulate me. Through it all, I remained gracious but distant. I wasn't celebrating Noah's downfall. I was simply witnessing the natural consequences of choices, his and mine. The newspaper article appeared on a Tuesday morning. I was having coffee on my cottage porch when Patricia called. "Have you seen the Gazette?" she asked breathlessly. "Front page." I hadn't, but I walked down to the corner store and bought a copy. The headline read, "Former attorney Noah Whitmore indicted on multiple fraud charges." The article detailed everything. The forged documents. The misappropriated client funds. The donations were solicited using my name without my knowledge. The county prosecutor was quoted extensively. "This represents a profound betrayal of trust," she said. Mr. Whitmore used his personal story and his association with respected community members to prey on vulnerable clients. I read the article twice, then folded the newspaper carefully. I didn't feel victorious or vindicated. I felt tired and old and sad. The boy I had tried to save had destroyed himself far more thoroughly than his parents' death ever could have. I walked to the lake's edge and stood there for a long time, watching the winter sun sparkle on the cold water. "Truth always walks home eventually," I whispered to the wind. It was something my mother used to say. I had never fully understood it until now. The knock on my cottage door came 3 days later, just after sunset. I knew who it would be before I opened it. Tessa stood on my porch, shivering in a thin jacket despite the December cold. Her face was blotchy from crying, her hair unwashed, her eyes hollow in a way that reminded me of Noah when Officer Martinez had first brought him to my door years ago. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice small and broken. I stepped aside wordlessly. She sat at my small kitchen table, The same table where I had eaten countless quiet meals alone. I made tea, not because she asked, but because it was what mothers do. We sat in silence for several minutes before she spoke. "He's ruined me, Mom," she whispered. "Financially, socially, emotionally. I don't know who I am anymore. I thought I was choosing love, but I was just choosing to be his echo." The words hung between us. I wanted to reach across the table, to comfort her, to say it would all be fine. But some truths need to be spoken before healing can begin. "You stopped being my daughter," I said quietly. "The moment you chose to be his echo instead of your own person. You didn't just marry Noah. You erased yourself for him." After that night, weeks passed in silence. I heard through Patricia that Tessa had moved out of my old house, that Noah was living there alone, that foreclosure proceedings had begun. I heard that Tessa was staying with friends, moving from couch to couch, trying to piece together the fragments of her life. I didn't reach out. Some lessons require solitude. Some growth requires struggle. Then, on a cold January morning, I found a small envelope in my mailbox. Inside was a single piece of paper with Tessa's handwriting. "I'm trying to be better, Mom. I joined your center. No apology, no excuses. Just a statement of intent." I stood in my driveway holding that note for several minutes, my breath forming clouds in the frozen air. It wasn't enough. It didn't erase months of betrayal. It didn't heal the wound of watching my daughter marry the boy I had raised. But it was something. It was the beginning. I tucked the note into my pocket and went inside to call the youth center. "This is Eleanor Price," I said when the director answered. "I understand my daughter Tessa has started volunteering. I'd like to visit tomorrow, if that's all right." The Riverside Youth Center occupied an old church building on the edge of town. I arrived on a Wednesday afternoon when I knew Tessa would be there for the after-school program. I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her help a teenager with homework. She looked different. Thinner, older, but also somehow more present. She wasn't performing for anyone. She was simply showing up. She looked up and saw me. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then she stood slowly and walked over. "Mom," she said, and that single word carried months of regret and hope. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We simply looked at each other with the kind of mutual understanding that only comes from shared pain. "The director says you've been here every day for 2 weeks, I said quietly. She nodded. "I needed to remember why you did this work. Why did you take Noah in? Why do you give so much of yourself? And have you remembered?" I asked. She smiled sadly. "I'm starting to. It's not about saving people. It's about seeing them." We stood there in that doorway, not mother and daughter yet, but not strangers anymore. The wound was still raw, the trust still broken. But healing had begun. Noah's sentencing hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday in February. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters and curious townspeople. I didn't attend the hearing itself. I had no desire to watch the boy I had raised stand before a judge and accept the consequences of his choices. Instead, I stayed at the cottage and watched the local news coverage. The camera showed Noah in a dark suit, his hands clasped, his face expressionless as the judge read the sentence. 3 years in prison for fraud and embezzlement. Restitution to all affected clients. Permanent disbarme. The reporter's voice droned on about the details, but I barely heard it. I was remembering a different Noah. The 16-year-old who had wept in my arms after a nightmare about his parents. The 17-year-old who had worked 2 jobs to save for college. The young man who had graduated law school called me to share the news. Where had that person gone? Or had he ever really existed? As the news segment ended, I turned off the television and sat in the gathering dusk. I didn't feel victorious. I felt the deep, aching sadness of watching someone destroy themselves. The letter arrived 2 weeks after Noah's sentencing. It was addressed in his handwriting, forwarded from my old address. I almost threw it away unopened. But curiosity won. I sat at my kitchen table and carefully opened the envelope. The letter was 3 pages long, written in the precise handwriting I recognized from years of watching him do homework at my dining room table. "Dear Eleanor," it began, and I almost stopped reading there. He hadn't called me that in years. The letter was part confession, part justification, part plea. He wrote about feeling forever indebted to me, about the pressure of being the grateful foster kid, about wanting to prove he was more than my charity case. I wanted to be someone you were proud of, he wrote on the second page. But the more successful I became, the more I felt like an imposter. I ruined everything trying to prove I was worthy of what you gave me. The final paragraph was simple. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even think I deserve it. I just wanted you to understand. I read the letter twice, then folded it carefully. That evening, I walked down to the lake's edge and burned it, watching the pages curl and blacken in the small fire I had built. The flames danced across the dark water. Some things needed to be released, not held. Spring arrived slowly that year, tentative and uncertain. In March, Harrison Gates called me to his office. The foreclosure is complete, he explained. The house reverts to your trust as stipulated. I had been expecting this, but the reality still stung. My home, empty now of the people who had tried to claim it, was mine again. What would you like to do with it? Harrison asked. I thought about the cold, dark house that had once been filled with warmth. I thought about Tessa and Noah living there, their relationship crumbling inside those walls. I thought about all the versions of myself who had existed in those rooms. I want to transform it, I said slowly, the idea forming as I spoke, into a community haven. A place for young adults who are transitioning out of foster care or difficult situations. A place where they can live temporarily while they get on their feet. Harrison smiled. The Price House, he suggested. I nodded. Exactly. Over the following months, I poured myself into the renovation. Mark Dalton's company handled the construction, transforming my family home into a welcoming space with 6 bedrooms, a communal kitchen, a library, and a counseling room. Every wall I watched come down felt like removing a layer of grief. The grand opening of the Price House took place on a Saturday in October, exactly 1 year after that terrible dinner when Tessa had announced her engagement to Noah. The October air was crisp and golden, the maple trees surrounding the house ablaze with color. Folding chairs filled the front lawn, and community members gathered to celebrate. I stood on the porch I had swept 1,000 times, looking at faces both familiar and new. The mayor spoke first, then the director of social services, then Harrison. But it was Tessa who surprised everyone. She approached the microphone, her hands trembling slightly. I hadn't known she was planning to speak. This house, she began, her voice gaining strength, was once where I lost myself. I forgot who my mother raised me to be. I forgot her lessons about integrity and selflessness. I chose pride and romance over family and truth. She looked directly at me. But my mother taught me something else too, something I almost forgot. She taught me that we can always begin again. Those mistakes don't define us, but how we respond to them does. Her voice cracked slightly. This house is now a place where people can find themselves, just as I'm trying to do. And that's who my mother always hoped I'd be, someone who gives rather than takes. The applause that followed was long and warm. The sun was setting as the last guests left the Price House. I sat alone on the front porch swing. The same swing where Thomas and I had watched countless sunsets years ago. The house behind me hummed with new life. 3 young adults had already moved in, beginning their journeys toward independence. Inside, I could hear them talking, laughing, and making dinner together. From down the street, Tessa walked toward me. She had changed into jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back simply. She climbed the porch steps and sat beside me on the swing. We didn't speak immediately, just rocked gently in the cooling evening air. Thank you, she finally said, for not giving up on this house. Or on me. I took her hand, the first physical contact we had shared in over a year. Some people think revenge is about payback, I said quietly, watching the sun paint the sky gold and pink. But the real victory is when peace finally sits where pain used to live. We sat there as darkness fell. Not quite healed but healing, not quite whole but on our way. The Price House glowed behind us, full of new stories waiting to be written. And for the first time in a year, I felt complete.